Hello, everybody, and you are very welcome to Successful Perspectives. Successful Perspectives, of course, is when we deep dive into the topic of leadership with one of our members from our very influential network, Boardroom by EMIR. On this conversation, I am delighted to be joined by Jack Uppal, who is the President and Managing Director for the Middle East and Africa at the famous General Motors. Jack, it is wonderful to have you on Successful Perspectives, and welcome.
Thank you, Trevor.
We've been engaged, so to speak, for around the last year or so, if my memory serves, that you came into the region. And I was also good friends with your predecessor, Loé, as well, who's a fantastic guy, to give Loé a shout out. And maybe we could just start off with what that journey has been like for you over the last year. Where you came in from, what were you thinking about the Middle East, and what have been some of your kind of your lessons or what your takeaways are from your first year?
I mean, Trevor, I think everybody knows it's not my first time in the Middle East or Dubai. I had the opportunity of being here about a decade ago and spending 4 years. And so you come in with some bias into the region. I've always been very inspired by the look forward and lean in mentality of this region, moving fast, taking risk, and building the future. So that was my expectation again as I came in. And I'll tell you, nothing has surprised me. If anything, I'm absolutely amazed and delighted with the pace of change, the acceptance of change, and challenging status quo and driving things forward, both within our own organization, but also the big change that I've seen is overall in the leadership landscape across the region, the focus on diversification and really driving growth towards a sustainable, sustainable environment, sustainable business, and diversifying from the traditional, sources of economic drive here. So, with that in the forefront, I've really enjoyed coming back. And really enjoyed the focus on driving a sustainable future, which from a General Motors perspective is absolutely aligned with our 000 philosophy and our vision. And within my team, just delighted how focused and aligned we are, both with the local leadership and local markets, and bringing our new products and services into the marketplace.
You know, Jack, it's an excellent point you bring up, and I never thought of it that way, in the sense of course, you have experience of the region from previously, and then coming back to it, there's quite an interesting experience within that, because I often see this with our network. Very often the global CEO will come into the region, or somebody from global HQ or EMEA or whatever way the structure is within the company. And on rare occasions, that person used to actually oversee the Middle East. I've had this happen a few times over the years, and they have these preconceptions of what the Middle East is like based on when they were here 10 years ago. And what I've noticed is, particularly in the places like UAE and now Saudi, there's these dramatic tectonic shifts in changes every few years. It's like a new place almost, and that change is quite dramatic. So it's an interesting experience for you coming back to see that. Now, speaking of the word change, I want to dive into the topic of leadership, because I've been looking forward to this conversation with you to kind of get into your mind a little bit. When you think of change, and maybe when you started out in your career, what was some of the misconceptions or perhaps a popular belief about being a leader that you realize now, with the benefit of overseeing a huge organization over a huge region? What do you realize now is some of the misconceptions or popular beliefs that you thought were about leadership, and now you realize, no, actually that was kind of nonsense?
When you start a career, you obviously don't have the experience and the visibility. It's also very easy to kind of see one or two different styles of leadership and start to emulate or understand what they're all about. But if I really look back, over the last 2 decades of experience and different levels and different varieties of leadership that I've been exposed to, I think one of the biggest beliefs, and as I've had now over the last decade, very senior roles within General Motors, I would say one of the beliefs that I had that leaders should have all the answers, or perhaps have all the answers, is probably one of the biggest nonsense items out there, because I don't think I have all the answers. I almost absolutely believe I don't have all the answers. And in reality, I would say my journey, if it's taught me anything in my leadership journey, is to aspire and to be a great leader that adds value. You actually need to truly rely on a lot of collaboration, and you need to understand how to inspire people to do their jobs, to find the right and the most effective answers. You need to understand and motivate and create an environment that allows an open, deliberate, unbiased debate to get to the best answers. And I don't believe that either a leader or any one individual in any situation has all the answers. So I would say, when people look at the individual kind of who's been given charge to lead, the fact that they're going to walk into a room with all the answers is probably the biggest myth that I would say exists about leaders.
And I smiled there when you gave that answer, because I do a lot of these chats, right? These conversations with very senior, successful leaders. And I've realized the common thread that comes through is consistently is this answer of this understanding that we don't have all the answers. And yet I feel like this is something that society or companies at large, we still, I think, hold on to that. But it's actually the leaders that understand are the ones that don't have the answers. I think it'd be, because I'm often saying to my teammates, I'm inventing this as we go along with you. I think they come to me sometimes thinking, oh, Trevor will have the right answer. And I'm like, I'm just coming up with what I think is the best thing in that situation based on the information you're giving me, and it may or may not be the best thing. So there's nothing to say that you coming up with the best possible outcome based on the information you have would be any better than mine. But we need to do it together in a kind of collaborative way. Now you mentioned there, over the last decade, you've been in very senior positions, and now you're over the Middle East and Africa, a big region, important region for GM. Do you feel that it can be lonely at the top in an organization? This is something you hear in popular culture around leadership. One, is this something that you buy into? And two, how do you kind of counteract that if it is the case, or who do you go to for advice? Or you mentioned that collaborative spirit there. How do you manage that?
I think the way you position the question, Trevor, is really good. It's really the environment you create for yourself as a leader, and what are your core values that you hold. At the core of my leadership values is really transparency, collaboration, and creating an environment for individuals to be inspired and motivated to give their best. In that environment, as a leader, I believe you have to become a little vulnerable. You have to become a little vulnerable with your team, your extended team, your direct reports, and allow you to have very close and open dialogue, which then also builds a very, very strong relationship and well-knit leadership team. I believe if over time you're able to do that, then the sense that certain leaders get, that it's fairly lonely at the top, which, I mean, if we look at it academically, you're not a team of 8 people leading the company alone. The hierarchy is set up in a certain way that you've got a leader, and you've got a few other leaders, and then you've got a few more, and then the team. So, inherently society sets up, this kind of a pyramid shape. And there's 2 things in it. At General Motors, what we're very proud of is that we very diligently worked in actually squeezing that and making the organization as flat as possible. But there is still going to be inherently, someone has to be held accountable at the end for driving direction and change. So inherently that could feel, as you've defined, as a lonely space. But what I've seen work for me, and it gets better every time with a new job, and you kind of start writing your own little bit of a guidebook on how you get to that stage. I think very initial stages, as you're learning the organization, you're learning the landscape, it could feel that way. But if you proactively really work on creating the right inclusive environment, along with kind of checking your ego out at the door and making yourself a bit vulnerable to the organization. To your first question, I don't have all the answers. Then I do believe that with that relationship, it could be actually quite a rewarding space for you to share with your peers. And some of the other tactical elements over the last decade or so that have worked quite well for me, Trevor, is in addition to your direct reports and within the organization, I do believe it is important to be part of networks like yours, which opens many doors for us, and have a network of peers, have a network of mentors, where there is kind of a room for no risk conversations to expand your horizon, expand your perspective on how business and leadership can be run, or something as simple as what their outlook on the current state of business or economic outlooks are. So I think a balance between those two give you a pretty good, should give it a leader, at least it does to me, gives me a very comfortable feeling of being where I am in my organization and feeling very comfortable amongst my direct reports and kind of my senior leadership team.
And also I would guess there, your direct reports and the team, and sharing or opening that space to be a little bit more vulnerable, that creates a closeness with the team. And it also, I would imagine, is advantageous in them being able to identify future leaders. The closer you get, the more open the team is. How do you go about doing that? Or how do you go about thinking about that? Because I would imagine in an organization like GM, that's an important part of future scenario planning in terms of who is going where and who fits the best positions. So how do you go about doing that and thinking about that? I think that would be interesting.
I'll give you two perspectives. There's fundamentally, each organization has its core values and behaviors. Okay. So at General Motors, we have a culture that we drive forward, which is, being bold. It's a culture of it's on me, that we take responsibility and accountability for our actions. We are innovative. We look forward. So we have, our core values and behaviors that are just inherent to how General Motors operates. And you can enter almost any office, and I've had the opportunity to be in dozens, if not more, regional and global offices around the world, hugely diverse. And then you walk in and you still feel within a minute of sitting into a meeting, you're sitting in a General Motors meeting because of the behaviors and values that we exhibit. So, as we identify and look for potential leaders, there's systematic ways of measuring business acumen and experience and so forth. For me, Trevor, and I'll make this a little bit personal, is I've always lived by the philosophy ever since I've been a leader, is you need three things, and General Motors and the world can teach you everything else. If you bring a positive attitude to win every day, if you bring our core behaviors and values, and you bring an open mindset to learn and grow, that's it. You bring those three things and you exhibit those three things, I think you're positioned for success almost anywhere. But at least from my lens, if you're going to work with an organization where I'm leading, those three for me are above and beyond any level of business or SME expertise that you could bring to the table. And then, you've got to have some core strengths that, communication, showcasing empathy as a leader. And at the same time, empathy balanced with being decisive, because all empathy or all decisiveness can lead astray into many different areas. And some of the other elements of, just being overall adaptable, which is part of the first three elements that I talked about. So if you walk away from this, what I'd like to really always communicate in this phase, it's really the emotional IQ that I'm looking for in an individual, and as a culture we're developing. And on the business side, really the ability to learn, make database decisions, and grow. So if those two are balanced, that's really a very good recipe of defining. And then the individual interactions and the relationships that you build, they kind of walk you through and identify where individuals land from a future perspective. But that's kind of my view on how I look for it.
No, I love it. And I love those three areas. And I think you apply those three principles, never mind to your career, to life. If you get up every day with those three ideas, that's it. You're only going in one direction in life, especially with the attitude of, how do I win today, and keeping an optimistic, open kind of mind to that. And when you talk about that, Jack, I can see your eyes lighting up. I can see you're passionate about that. Something we talk about a lot, and this will be one last question before we shift and have a little bit of fun with our rapid fire round. But one question we find ourselves talking a lot about with all of the CEOs and leaders in our network is purpose. And I just got a little kind of, I could see a spark in your eye there when you were talking about all of that. And it made me think of it. How do you go about thinking about purpose?
Again, purpose, Trevor, is something, that's usually very core to an individual. And before I get to that specific answer, and I will share kind of how do I go about focusing, or what is Jack's purpose, or how do I find my purpose? To get to the core, you got to understand a few outer layers of an individual. And from, being very open and transparent with you, I personally like to take a lot of time for self-reflection, in both identifying my strengths and blind spots. And then I have a bit of a systematic way of spending about 80% of my time maximizing, growing my strengths, where I have, this craving to learn and grow. But then, very systematically also leaving about 20% of my time in getting feedback, in doing regular check-ins with all stakeholders, whether it's my wife or my peers or my supervisor, on my blind spots. And I'm going to, on this, beyond General Motors or my career. I'm sharing it with you as a person. As a person, we have strengths and blind spots. So, at a crossroads in your life, you figure out, first of all, you have to come to the realization that we all do have blind spots, right? And the admittance of that, I think, is where you really grow as a person. But then I also had great mentors and coaching along the way. That also, the first tendency, at least on my behavior, was I started focusing a lot of time on the blind spots, because it started to freak me out. Like, am I doing that? And then I had to course correct from that and say, no, the reality is that strengths is what's gotten me here and what's going to drive me to my future. My blind spots are a bit more of a roadblock, so I just need to be more aware of them and have regular feedbacks to manage them. I may not be able to completely, to get rid of them. So that is a big mental process on what I focus on in setting my goals, in how I approach life in general. So now going to what the purpose is, I actually feel, just very simple purpose in life, to be very honest. And that is, no matter what interaction, what stage of life, where I am, I want to leave that interaction and that space 1% better than when I got there. That's it. That's the purpose. If I'm at work one morning and we came in at whatever the X baseline is, when I leave at 5 o'clock and I can look in the mirror and say, I left that place a little better, whether, we recognized a great moment for an employee or we achieved a great result. For me, leaving every situation a little bit better than when I walked into that situation is a key purpose that I live for. And secondly, 2-3 decades of experience and this great fortunate journey that my employer and my family has allowed me to be on, is be able to share those experiences with as many people in any way or form that can somehow help them grow and get better on their journey. So those are the two places I truly pull my purpose from, Trevor. And that's about as deep and open I can get with you on this call.
And it's one of the best answers we've had. I would say it's one of the best answers we've had, especially, well, both parts of it really. The first part is really comes down to know thyself, right? Yeah, and I'm a big fan of this. My teammates will laugh when they hear me saying this. You know, I'm obsessed with all of our personality assessments, and because I recognize these are just areas for me personally where I can see, none of us are perfect, right? I have lots of flaws, and I'm like, this is the area I can at least, as you say, I may not eradicate it, but at least even if you do nothing on it, right? Which I don't suggest, but even if you've done nothing on it, even the awareness that you're not as strong in that area is a huge, huge benefit, right? And then if you can work towards improving it a bit, I think that's really important. The thing I'm going to take away, I always take something away from one of these chats. The thing I'm going to take away from this one is the idea of taking it a step further on the blind spots, like including with my wife, you know, because that's arguably, well, inarguably the best review you can get, because there's nobody closer to you, you know. Jack, thank you so much for being on Successor Perspectives. It was an absolute pleasure, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Trevor. Thanks for the opportunity, and always enjoy these interactions with you.
Thank you.